Welcome back. And for this conversation, I am joined by two up and coming and actually very established performance artists or artists who have performance as part of their practice, very multidisciplinary artists, Chisato Minamimura and Gold Akanbi.
And my name is Gold Akanbi, and I'm a Black woman of British Nigerian heritage, and I have a red afro, and I'm currently sitting in front of some books and a plant. In terms of my practice, I work in many different disciplines. I paint, I write poetry, I create short films, and I do performance art that mainly focuses on gesture and improvisation.
My name is Chisato. This is my sign name, Chisato. It is done with one straight finger tapping on the tip of the nose twice. I am a Far East Asian woman. I have dark short hair and I'm wearing a black long-sleeved t-shirt. I was born in Japan, but I moved to live in Britain, and I currently live and work in London. I have a few different strands of my work, including being an artistic director, a performer, and a BSL art guide. Working here in London, I'm especially interested in finding the hidden stories within things and adding my deaf perspective to it. I'm also interested in how digital art and the 5 human senses can be integrated creatively. Over my career, I have worked and collaborated with many different people from many different places.
You both use your bodies in very different ways in order to kind of convey the core of the narrative within your performance work, but in very, very different ways. And when you're on stage, you're both, or when you're performing rather, you work with very different energies. And I was just intrigued to understand how rest kind of plays a part both when you're performing, but also when you're developing your work. So if I could go to Chisato first and ask Chisato, if you could just kind of summarize your practice and how you kind of create your ideas, where your ideas come from, and how rest plays a part within that process of making.
Most of the work I do involves quite a long process. This is because the art I make is utterly unique and therefore needs a lot of work. It often consists of things which have never been done before and is the first of its kind, so I regularly need to conduct a large amount of research and development work, including consulting with other creatives to gain ideas of what to produce. The work I create cannot be done quickly or all at once. It involves a lot of work, much research, and many collaborations. All this can occur in quite an intensive short period of time, and the time after this I could describe as rest. It's quite interesting. I suppose it's true that my work often consists of a short burst of intensive work and then a long period of what can be considered rest time. But really, during that time, my body, which has been worked hard and is tired at this time, might be resting, but my brain will continue turning during this downtime. I will be reflecting on the work completed during the last busy period, whether I want to make any changes, coming up with any new ideas to guide my next steps, etc. And so really this period of rest after working is actually extremely important.
Gold, does your process contrast at all in terms of the way that you work and the way you build rest into the process? And also, when you're performing, do you kind of create modes of rest within the actual performance itself?
Oh wow, I think it's really similar to Chisato in the sense that when your body is resting, your mind isn't necessarily resting. And also, I recently found that relaxation and rest is not the same thing. And that was a bit troubling to realize, because sometimes I could relax, but that doesn't mean I could rest. And I think that's why I work so often within digital performance, just because I'm able to regulate myself and those who I'm working with, our physical, our mental, and maybe our spiritual strengths. It's easier to navigate those.
I absolutely agree with everything that Gold has said there. Rest and relaxation are very different indeed. That's a very good point. My view on this is that relaxation needs a very specific environment in which to happen. It is difficult to do it in an environment that is still very stimulating, where things are still happening around you and there's a lot of noise. It's hard to switch off in that kind of situation. That's my view.
Kind of your process now, looking at what's important for you, like in terms of whether the process of making feels more important to you as an artist, or whether the finished product is more important to you.
Because it nourishes you, it's like you kind of feed off of the energy after a while. It helps you live. It becomes part of like your, not necessarily your identity, but it becomes part of your life. And if it kind of feeds your own energy, and aside from the actual financial aspect of actually being able to work and live, when you don't even need the money anymore, you still find yourself working, because it's more than just work. At some point it becomes, as you said, a form of nourishment, a form of fulfilling your deepest desires, being able to materialize emotion and concepts that you think can inspire or improve something in some way. I think when you're thinking about that, rest really isn't the main focus.
Yes, I feel that when we get into the routine of working and creating and resting, it can turn into a certain kind of rhythm. This rhythm is strongly linked to our natural or circadian rhythms. This means that when you have a vision of what you want to create at the very end, our bodies will instinctively try to work out how to achieve it. Sometimes what we envisaged at the start of the journey and what emerges at the end of it are two completely different things, which means that something that you hurry through making might not be exactly what you were destined to make. As such, working slowly and thoroughly may yield you a larger quantity of work, and that work can be much more valuable.
I feel like I have a creative battery, and when I'm with artists, my battery is, kind of at its fullest, and it's all actually charging. Whereas when I'm with um, other people and I'm trying to kind of explain work, it depletes really quickly, and I feel exhausted. And I was just wondering, in terms of the aerial work, how you kind of regulate yourself and regulate your creativity, because that must be very kind of taxing on yourself.
Ah, yes, the aerial performances. I've been really lucky to have been involved in those. And it's true that you do use your entire body as you're flying through the air. You expend so much energy. I've really enjoyed myself in all the various aerials I've been involved in. One such performance was in 2012, when I was part of the London Paralympic opening ceremony, performing on what's called a sway pole. From bottom to top, this was a 4-meter tall structure, and we had to climb all the way up ourselves. At the top was a crossbar where we stood, and we were attached via our feet and a harness across our thighs. The pole was fixed at the bottom, which meant we could sway all the way around at the top on the flexible metal. It was absolutely exhilarating and it felt like I was flying like a bird. It was a beautiful experience. But we really had to train our bodies extremely hard, especially our abdominal muscles. Our team had to work out and exercise intensively every single day, which meant by the day of the opening ceremony, we all of us had solid six packs. Now, unfortunately, all of it's gone. One especially difficult part of training was how frequently we had to climb up and down the poles, many times every single day. Sometimes I decided that during a break time, I wouldn't make the trip to climb all the way down and just took my rest standing at the top of the pole. It really was an entirely amazing experience.
And, and Gold, similarly, you present yourself in a lot of video work, so your performance is very much to camera, and that must be very taxing on you as well, in terms of taking and retaking and kind of checking and so on and so forth. And I was just thinking about your creative battery in that process, kind of second guessing what you've just done and working out whether you need to kind of take another shot and so on and so forth.
This is really interesting because I think it's one of the reasons why I haven't moved into live performance yet. I guess I'm giving myself the mental endurance to continue to perform for a certain period of time. So when I'm recording, I never stop performing. Even when I edit and I get little clips of things, I perform for a certain amount of time, but not for that long, because I have fibromyalgia and hypermobility spectrum disorder. So there's only so much I can do without maybe popping out a limb or something, which we're trying to avoid. But actually, because I work purely off adrenaline to try and kind of subdue the pain. So when I have a rush of like energy, that sustains me to perform for a certain amount of time. And that's what I rely on to create work. So then I recently found that my creative battery is reliant on how much I want something or how much adrenaline I can actually kind of draw out from myself. That's what it's really reliant on. And that's also reliant on my connection to the work. So everything sounds extremely emotional, but at the time, it doesn't feel emotional. It just feels like I have to weigh so many pros and cons, and there are only so many spoons. I don't know if you've heard of the concept of spoons in terms of disabled people. So let's say you have 10 spoons, and setting up the camera, it takes 3 spoons, and then talking to everyone takes another 3. So then you only have like 4 left to actually continue performing. So that's like a concept that certain disabled people online use in terms of just their energy levels. And I feel like with creativity, it changes for me because it depends on that energy that I can sustain or that I can bring forth just for the work. Sometimes I have 15 spoons, sometimes I only have 5. So I was recently in a situation where, because my body couldn't connect to the work, and because I mentally and emotionally and maybe spiritually couldn't connect to the work and to the audience that were going to be there, the work couldn't be made. And that really hurt me as an artist that wants to have a career that is sustainable. It hurt me to not be able to, draw forth that energy and rely on that to create the work like I usually do, because it's almost like all the negativity that surrounded the audience and the people I was meant to be working with, it kept me from being able to do that. And so, yeah, it's very taxing.
I can imagine, really imagine. So if we can move on to what you're working on right now, if you can talk about the latest work you're developing and the catalysts for its development, both the catalysts and maybe what was holding you back in the process, but what you're excited about as well.
I recently finished a project called Hezekiah. Hesychia is an ancient Greek word that means silence. It was a project that was created as part of an arts and heritage programme called Meeting Point. Meeting Point was a UK-wide programme that worked with a number of different museums and art galleries. The programme looked for different artists to go into collaboration with each of them. These artists were to engage with their installations, collaborate with their communities, and were encouraged to create brand new artworks from that. This year, Meeting Point focused on the southwest area and brought me in to work with Reading University. There, they have a small museum called the Your Museum. It's an absolute tiny place, but it has an amazing collection with ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Mesopotamian artifacts, all extremely valuable. I remember visiting the space, having a good look at their collection, and thinking about what I wanted to create. I also spoke to some of the experts they have working at the university, and they told me about how in ancient times there was no artificial light, there were no candles or lamps, and it got me thinking, how did ancient peoples enjoy the time after dark? And the answer was that they would look up at the stars and connect them into constellations and then create these stories of the gods they saw up there. The staff told me many stories of these gods, and I became extremely fascinated with two of them especially. One was that of an ancient Egyptian bird god called Bennu. And the second story is one that is a little more well known. It's that of the monster from ancient Greek myth, Medusa. I learned about her origins and how she eventually became the creature Medusa from the staff at the museum. And I turned her story into VV, visual vernacular. Visual vernacular. It's a deaf performance method used by many deaf performance artists. It incorporates sign language, mime, gesture, and lots of other visual elements to create a unique visual performance. So, I created a visual vernacular performance. I recorded it and projected it onto a screen that was suspended on the ceiling. Visitors of the installation would lie down and watch the film, emulating the way ancient people gazed up at the stars. The floor beneath them was soft carpet, and they also heard a soundscape created especially for this piece. They were also offered one of these. It's called a wuja strap, and they'd wear it around their body. This converted the soundscape into vibrations that they could also feel. On the carpet were also pillows on which I dropped frankincense oil, which all the visitors could smell. Lastly, on the opening night, we also had some wine. It's the fifth sense being explored during this installation. Now I'm going to share with you some images from the night. This was the opening night, so you can see how it was all set up. You can see the screen on the ceiling and the carpet on the ground. This is how people would lie down and watch the film of my performance on the ceiling. And then you can see Leanne there. She was my interpreter at the Q&A as well. This was, one of the marketing images. Hesychia, that was the project name.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. And Gold.
I'm meant to be creating a performance work by the beach, so I have to find a beach soon. It was inspired by my fellowship with Sonia Boyce, which I just had recently in Venice. and I'm meant to be creating a short film that's it. So because my name is Gold and there's loads of gold in Sonia Boyce's exhibition, it's really funny because when people think of gold, they think of, oh, so luxurious and bright and expensive. But for me, I just remember I just think of loads of trauma. The relationship between Black people and gold isn't as beautiful as the relationship other people have with it. And I think that the performance that I would like to create, which is going to be digital, and I'll be recording it and putting it together for their catalogue, it's going to look more at the sense of this thing of digging deeper into oneself. So I will be digging like performatively into the sand and trying to almost create the crevice where I will try and pull something out. It's more symbolic of me digging into myself to find the meaning of what it means to have value. And the process is very strange right now because I'm not used to having bits of work in different places. So I'm used to normally having one project, but I have a solo exhibition in Wales, which is different to this. So I then have to find a way of doing that soon, and then doing the performance work in itself. And that's it. It's really strange. But what feels more strange, I think, is creating work that's inspired by other artwork, whilst also staying original and staying true to like my voice and the interests that I can relate to. I mean, it was really great meeting Sonia because I think my group was the only group that met Sonia Boyce, which is really nice. But also, when I did speak to Sonia about the work, she reminded me of that film or the book by Roald Dahl, you know, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And it was almost like Sonia had won this golden ticket. And then, but for me, the concept of the golden ticket changed when I saw her exhibition. And in the exhibition, you can see ingrained on the walls, like etchings of slave ships and maps and other things that felt familiar, but you couldn't quite touch upon what they were. And so that was this whole concept of illusion. And I'm still trying to find ways of embedding that into the work. But yeah, that's what I'm working on.
That sounds fantastic. Speaking about Sonia Boyce reminds me, always takes me back to university and wanting to write about Sonia. But this is in the mid-90s, and Sonia was an up-and-coming artist at that point, and I had to do a module of art history. And I wanted to write about Sonia, and there was some pushback from the lecturers, and we were in this tussle at that point, you know, as to kind of like writing about a Black artist, whereas they wanted me to write about some dead French artists. It was quite something, but this was back in the mid-90s, so you know, but it's great that you're getting the chance to work with Sonia, and also kind of develop your own work and kind of work in this kind of multi-layered way almost, you know, with the exhibition happening and with the well, for both of you. I wanted to thank you for joining us during this conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.